The silence in our family dining room felt suffocating as Mom's palm crashed against the mahogany table, her wedding ring creating a sharp metallic echo that seemed to reverberate through my entire world. "You refused your sister's loan? You're out of this family, Serafina." Her words hit harder than any physical blow ever could. 28 years of unconditional love, shared memories, and blood bonds were apparently worth less than $50,000. But what Mom didn't know yet was that I had just discovered something that would change everything about our perfect family facade forever. Before we dive into this shocking family betrayal story, I would love to know where you're watching from. Please hit that like button if family drama gets your heart racing, and don't forget to subscribe because this story has more twists than a soap opera. Trust me, you won't want to miss what happens when the truth finally comes to light. 3 days before that devastating dinner confrontation, I had been living in blissful ignorance, believing my family was built on genuine love and mutual respect. As a successful marketing executive at a tech startup in Austin, Texas, I thought I had finally proven myself worthy of my parents' pride. My corner office overlooked the vibrant downtown skyline, and my salary afforded me a comfortable lifestyle that I had worked tirelessly to achieve since graduating from business school. The request came on a Tuesday morning when my younger sister Madison called, her voice trembling with what I initially interpreted as vulnerability. "Sarah, I need your help," she whispered into the phone using the childhood nickname that always melted my defenses. "I made some bad investment decisions and I owe some really dangerous people money, $50,000 to be exact." My stomach dropped as I listened to her elaborate tale of cryptocurrency investments gone wrong, of promises made to shadowy figures who were now demanding immediate payment. Madison painted herself as a victim of sophisticated financial predators who had manipulated her trusting nature. She spoke of sleepless nights, constant anxiety, and the very real fear that these people might resort to violence if she could not produce the money within a week. "I wouldn't ask if I had anywhere else to turn," she continued, her sobs becoming more pronounced. "You know, I've always been terrible with money, but this time it's different. This time people could actually get hurt." Something in her story felt rehearsed, but I pushed down my skepticism because family loyalty had been drilled into me since childhood. Our parents, particularly our mother, had always emphasized that blood relationships were sacred, that family members should sacrifice anything for each other without question. This philosophy had shaped every major decision in my life, often to my own detriment. However, $50,000 represented nearly half of my carefully accumulated emergency fund money I had been saving for a down payment on my dream home. The house I had been eyeing for months was finally within reach, and this loan would effectively destroy that goal for the foreseeable future. When I expressed these concerns to Madison, her demeanor shifted dramatically. "So you care more about some stupid house than your own sister's safety?" She snapped, her vulnerability instantly replaced by accusatory anger. "I guess I know where I stand in your priorities now." The guilt manipulation was expertly executed, but something deeper was bothering me about the entire situation. Madison had always been the favored child, the one who could do no wrong in our parents' eyes. While I had worked multiple jobs through college and graduate school, Madison had been gifted a full ride through life, complete with a trust fund that should have prevented any genuine financial emergencies. That evening, I made a decision that would change everything. Instead of agreeing to the loan immediately, I decided to conduct some discreet research into Madison's claims. Using my connections in the financial industry, I reached out to a private investigator who specialized in financial fraud cases. If Madison was truly in danger, I wanted to ensure we were dealing with the situation properly and safely. What Marcus, the private investigator, discovered over the next 48 hours was so shocking that I initially refused to believe it. The cryptocurrency story was completely fabricated. There were no dangerous creditors, no bad investments, and no financial emergency whatsoever. Instead, Madison had been living a double life that our entire family was completely unaware of. The $50,000 she desperately needed was not for debt repayment, but for funding an elaborate lifestyle that she had been documenting on social media under a false identity. Marcus showed me Instagram and TikTok accounts where Madison portrayed herself as a wealthy influencer complete with designer clothes, exotic vacations, and luxury experiences that were far beyond her actual means. She had been financing this fake lifestyle through a complex web of credit card debt and personal loans, but more disturbingly, she had been using our family's reputation and connections to secure these funds. The most devastating revelation came when Marcus uncovered financial records showing that Madison had already borrowed significant amounts of money from our extended family members, including our elderly grandmother and several cousins. In each case, she had crafted elaborate stories about emergencies, medical bills, or educational expenses. None of these stories were true, and none of the money had been repaid. But the final piece of evidence that shattered my faith in my family was a series of text messages between Madison and our mother. Marcus had obtained these through completely legal means as Madison had been careless about her digital security. The messages revealed that Mom was not only aware of Madison's fraudulent activities, but was actively helping her plan and execute them. "Serafina is so naive," one message from Mom read. "She'll never question your story if you make it dramatic enough. Just remember to cry when you ask her." Another message was even more damning. "If she refuses, we'll use the family loyalty angle, threaten to cut her off completely. She values family approval more than money anyway." The betrayal was so profound that I physically felt sick reading those words. My own mother was treating me like a mark in a confidence scheme, and my sister was nothing more than an accomplished actress playing a role designed to exploit my love for them. As I sat in my apartment that night staring at the evidence spread across my coffee table, I realized that everything I thought I knew about my family was a carefully constructed lie. The unconditional love I had believed in was actually conditional on my willingness to be financially exploited. The family unity that had been preached to me throughout my life was nothing more than a convenient tool for manipulation. I made a decision that night that would set everything in motion. Instead of confronting Madison and Mom immediately, I decided to play along with their game while secretly documenting everything. If they wanted to treat me like a fool, I would give them exactly what they expected while gathering evidence of their fraud that could be used to protect other potential victims. The next morning, I called Madison back and told her I needed a few days to liquidate some investments before I could provide the loan. She was thrilled, thanking me repeatedly, and promising that this would be the last time she would ever need to ask for help. The performance was so convincing that I almost felt guilty for not believing her initially. But now I knew the truth and I was going to make sure that justice was served. Armed with devastating evidence of my family's betrayal, I realized that simply refusing the loan would not be enough. Madison and Mom had been systematically defrauding family members for months, possibly years, and their pattern of behavior suggested they would continue targeting vulnerable relatives if not stopped completely. The scope of their deception was so extensive that it required a carefully orchestrated response to ensure maximum impact and protection for their other victims. My first step was to contact Marcus again and expand his investigation to include all of our extended family members. I needed to understand the full scope of Madison's financial crimes before deciding how to proceed. What he discovered over the following days was even worse than I had initially feared. Our 72-year-old grandmother, Nana Rose, had given Madison $15,000 just 3 months earlier, believing it was for medical expenses related to a fabricated gynecological condition. The money had actually funded a luxury vacation to the Bahamas that Madison had documented extensively on her secret social media accounts. When I saw the photos of her lounging on pristine beaches while Nana Rose was rationing her own medications to afford what she thought was helping her granddaughter, I felt a rage unlike anything I had ever experienced. Cousin Julia had provided $8,000 for what Madison claimed were emergency car repairs after an accident. The truth was that Madison had used the money to purchase designer handbags that she displayed prominently in her influencer content. Uncle Robert had contributed $12,000 for what he believed were college tuition payments, money that had actually gone toward cosmetic procedures and expensive restaurant meals. The pattern was sickeningly consistent across every victim. Madison would research each family member's specific vulnerabilities and craft personalized stories designed to trigger maximum sympathy and financial generosity. She knew that Nana Rose worried constantly about health issues, so she invented medical emergencies. She knew that Julia valued education and hard work, so she created academic or professional crises. She knew that Uncle Robert had struggled financially in his youth and would never want another family member to experience similar hardships, so she fabricated scenarios that echoed his own past difficulties. Most devastatingly, I discovered that Mom had been providing detailed intelligence about each family member's financial situation, emotional triggers, and personal values to help Madison craft more effective manipulation strategies. Their collaboration was so sophisticated that it resembled a professional con operation more than simple family dysfunction. While gathering this evidence, I maintained my facade of naive cooperation with their scheme. I called Madison regularly to provide updates on my supposed efforts to liquidate investments for her loan. Each conversation was secretly recorded using a legal recording app, as Texas is a one-party consent state for recording conversations. Madison's responses provided additional evidence of her fraudulent intent, particularly when she began pressuring me to expedite the process and suggesting alternative methods for accessing the money more quickly. During one particularly revealing conversation, Madison let her mask slip completely when she thought she had convinced me to withdraw the money from my retirement account instead of my savings. "You're such a good sister, Sarah," she said, her voice dripping with false gratitude. "Most people would be too selfish to help family when it really matters. I promise I'll pay you back as soon as my situation stabilizes." When I gently pressed for more details about her supposed creditors and the timeline for repayment, Madison became evasive and ultimately aggressive. "Why are you asking so many questions?" she demanded. "Do you trust me or not? Because if you don't trust your own sister, maybe we need to reevaluate our entire relationship." The manipulation tactics were textbook examples of emotional blackmail designed to make the victim feel guilty for asking reasonable questions about a significant financial transaction. Madison had clearly perfected these techniques through extensive practice on our family members. Meanwhile, Mom began applying pressure from a different angle. She started calling me daily to discuss Madison's situation, each conversation following a predictable script designed to reinforce my sense of family obligation while discouraging any critical thinking about the request. "Madison is really struggling, honey," Mom would say, her tone carefully modulated to convey maternal concern. "I know $50,000 is a lot of money, but family is forever. Money comes and goes, but you only have one sister." When I mentioned that I was concerned about the impact on my own financial goals, Mom's responses became increasingly manipulative. She began questioning my priorities, suggesting that my focus on personal achievement was selfish and unfamily-like. She even went so far as to imply that my success had somehow damaged my relationship with Madison, creating feelings of inadequacy that contributed to her current crisis. "Madison has always felt like she was living in your shadow," Mom explained during one particularly toxic conversation. "Your achievements make her feel like a failure, and that's why she's made these poor decisions. In a way, helping her now is taking responsibility for the role your success played in her struggles." The victim blaming was so expertly executed that I began to understand how other family members had been successfully manipulated. Mom had an intuitive understanding of guilt and shame, and she wielded these emotions like surgical instruments to achieve her desired outcomes. But I was no longer the naive daughter who accepted family narratives without question. Every conversation was being recorded, every claim was being fact-checked, and every manipulation attempt was being documented for future use. I was building an ironclad case that would not only expose Madison and Mom, but also provide evidence that could be used to help other family members recover their stolen money. The most challenging aspect of this period was maintaining my emotional equilibrium while living with such profound betrayal. Every family interaction felt like participating in an elaborate theater production, where I was the only person who knew the script was fiction. I had to smile and nod while listening to people I had loved and trusted my entire life discuss strategies for exploiting my generosity and manipulating my emotions. The psychological toll was immense, but I found strength in my commitment to protecting other family members who might become future victims. Nana Rose, Uncle Robert, Cousin Julia, and others deserved to know the truth about how their love and generosity had been exploited. They deserve the opportunity to make informed decisions about their relationships with Madison and Mom, based on accurate information rather than carefully crafted lies. As the week progressed and Madison's deadline approached, I finalized my preparations for the confrontation that would change our family forever. I had evidence, I had recordings, I had documentation of financial fraud spanning months, and most importantly, I had the moral clarity that comes from knowing you are fighting for justice rather than revenge. The stage was set for a reckoning that none of them saw coming. As Madison's fabricated deadline approached, I realized that simply exposing their fraud would not be sufficient to protect future victims or recover the money already stolen from our family members. I needed to orchestrate a comprehensive response that would simultaneously document their crimes, alert all potential victims, and create consequences significant enough to prevent future attempts at financial manipulation. My strategy required careful coordination with multiple parties, beginning with the other family members who had been victimized. However, I could not simply contact them directly without risking that Madison and Mom would be warned about my investigation. Instead, I worked with Marcus to develop a plan that would reveal the truth to everyone simultaneously while preventing the perpetrators from destroying evidence or crafting new lies to explain their behavior. The first crucial step was securing legal counsel. Through my professional network, I connected with Sarah Martinez, a criminal defense attorney who specialized in financial fraud cases. After reviewing the evidence Marcus had gathered, she confirmed that Madison's activities likely constituted wire fraud, identity theft, and elder abuse in Nana Rose's case. Mom's participation made her legally complicit in these crimes, potentially facing charges as an accessory or co-conspirator. Sarah explained that the combination of electronic communications, documented financial transfers, and recorded admissions created a compelling case for prosecution. More importantly, she helped me understand how to preserve evidence properly and coordinate with law enforcement to maximize the chances of successful criminal charges and civil recovery of stolen funds. While preparing the legal framework, I also began documenting Madison's social media presence under her false identity. Marcus had provided me with access credentials, allowing me to screenshot and download extensive evidence of how our family's money was being spent. The contrast between Madison's public persona as a successful influencer and her private reality as a serial family fraudster was so stark that it would be impossible for anyone to deny the truth once presented with visual evidence. The luxury vacation photos taken during the period when she claimed to be in financial crisis were particularly damning. I could prove that while Nana Rose was literally eating canned soup for dinner to save money for Madison's supposed medical expenses, Madison was drinking champagne at exclusive beach resorts and documenting her extravagant lifestyle for social media followers. Similarly, the designer shopping sprees that coincided with Uncle Robert's tuition payments created an undeniable timeline of deception. Every purchase, every experience, and every luxury item could be directly traced to specific family members' contributions, creating a clear pattern of theft disguised as family assistance. As I compiled this evidence, I also discovered that Madison had been actively seeking additional victims beyond our immediate family circle. Her social media messages revealed ongoing conversations with family friends, former classmates, and even casual acquaintances where she was testing various sob stories and financial requests. She had developed multiple personas and elaborate backstories designed to appeal to different types of potential donors. One particularly disturbing conversation showed Madison discussing her strategies with someone identified only as K in her contacts. This person appeared to be coaching Madison on advanced manipulation techniques, suggesting specific psychological triggers and emotional appeals that would be most effective for different personality types. The conversation revealed that Madison's fraud was not impulsive or amateur, but rather a calculated criminal enterprise with outside guidance. Remember, the key is making them feel responsible for your problems, Kay had written. If they think they somehow contributed to your crisis, they'll feel obligated to provide the solution. Guilt is much more powerful than sympathy. This discovery added another layer of complexity to the situation. Madison was not just stealing from our family. She was part of a larger network that was likely targeting multiple families simultaneously. The implications were staggering, suggesting that dozens or potentially hundreds of people might be victims of similar schemes. I shared this information with Sarah, who immediately recognized the federal implications of an organized fraud network operating across state lines. She helped me contact the appropriate FBI units that investigate financial crimes, ensuring that our family situation would be handled as part of a broader investigation that could protect many other victims. Meanwhile, the pressure from Madison and Mom was intensifying dramatically. Madison had begun calling multiple times per day, her desperation seeming increasingly genuine as her fabricated deadline approached. But I now understood that her panic was not about dangerous creditors, but about maintaining her luxury lifestyle and avoiding the collapse of her carefully constructed false identity. "Sarah, I'm literally begging you," she sobbed during one call. "These people are going to hurt me if I don't have the money by Friday. I can't sleep, I can't eat, I'm completely falling apart. Please don't let anything happen to your baby sister." The performance was so convincing that I almost felt guilty for not believing her, even though I knew every word was a calculated lie. Madison had clearly practiced these emotional appeals extensively, perfecting her ability to trigger protective instincts and family loyalty responses. Mom's approach was becoming more aggressive and manipulative as well. She had begun questioning my character and values, suggesting that my reluctance to immediately provide the money revealed fundamental flaws in my personality and moral development. "I'm starting to wonder if success has changed you, Serafina," she said during one particularly toxic conversation. "The daughter I raised would never prioritize money over family safety. Maybe all those business school classes taught you to think like a corporate executive instead of a caring sister." The psychological manipulation was expertly crafted to attack my deepest insecurities about achieving success while maintaining family connections. Mom knew exactly which emotional buttons to push because she had installed most of them during my childhood and adolescence. But her tactics were also providing additional evidence for the criminal case. Every conversation was being recorded, every manipulative statement was being documented, and every attempt to coerce me into providing money was creating a stronger foundation for prosecution. As Friday approached, I finalized preparations for the confrontation that would expose everything. I had arranged for Sarah to be present via phone during the family dinner, where I planned to reveal the truth, ensuring that any admissions or threats would be properly witnessed and documented. I had also coordinated with Marcus to have additional evidence ready for immediate presentation to law enforcement if Madison and Mom attempted to flee or destroy evidence. Most importantly, I had prepared comprehensive information packets for each victimized family member, complete with evidence of how their money had been stolen and documentation of Madison's real activities. These packets would be delivered simultaneously to prevent any attempts at damage control or spin management. The truth was about to come out, and I was ready for whatever consequences might follow. After years of being manipulated and exploited, I was finally in a position to fight back effectively. Madison and Mom had built their scheme on the assumption that family loyalty would prevent anyone from investigating their claims or challenging their narratives. They were about to learn that loyalty is a two-way street, and betrayal has consequences that extend far beyond hurt feelings. The perfect storm was building, and they had no idea what was about to hit them. Justice was coming, and it was going to be absolutely devastating. How are you feeling about this family betrayal so far? The tension is really building up, isn't it? Don't worry, you won't believe what happens when everything finally explodes in the next part. The confrontation that's coming will shake this family to its core, and the truth that comes out will leave everyone speechless. Stay with me because we're just getting to the really shocking parts. Friday evening arrived with the weight of inevitability. I sat in my car outside our family home, watching through the illuminated dining room windows as Mom set the table with her finest china, completely unaware that this would be the last family dinner we would ever share. The irony was not lost on me that she was preparing for what she thought would be a celebration of successful manipulation using the same elegant dinnerware that had graced countless genuine family celebrations throughout my childhood. Madison arrived precisely on time, her appearance carefully crafted to maximize sympathy. She wore minimal makeup to emphasize her supposed exhaustion, chose clothing that appeared slightly disheveled to suggest ongoing stress, and even managed to produce dark circles under her eyes that looked convincingly like sleepless nights. The performance was so detailed that I found myself grudgingly impressed by her commitment to the deception. "Sarah, thank God you're here," she said, embracing me with what felt like genuine relief. "I've been so scared that I was going to lose everything. You're literally saving my life with this loan." The words felt like knives because part of me still wanted to believe that my sister was capable of genuine emotion and authentic connection. Even knowing the truth about her fraudulent scheme, I struggled with the cognitive dissonance of reconciling the Madison I had loved my entire life with the calculating criminal I now knew her to be. As we gathered around the dining table, Mom began serving her famous pot roast, the same meal she had prepared for every important family occasion since my childhood. The familiar aromas and comforting atmosphere created a surreal backdrop for what was about to unfold. Dad, completely oblivious to the undercurrents of deception and betrayal, chatted pleasantly about his recent golf games and retirement plans. "So, honey, were you able to get everything arranged for Madison?" Mom asked, her tone perfectly calibrated to sound supportive rather than demanding. I know it was short notice, but family always comes through for each other. I reached into my purse and pulled out a manila envelope, placing it ceremoniously on the table between the serving dishes. "Actually, I have something much more valuable than money to give Madison tonight," I said, maintaining eye contact with my sister as I spoke. "I have the truth." The atmosphere in the room shifted instantly, like the moment before a thunderstorm, when the air becomes charged with electricity. Madison's carefully constructed expression of grateful anticipation flickered for just a moment, revealing a flash of something that looked suspiciously like panic. "What do you mean, sweetheart?" Mom asked, her voice taking on the artificially sweet tone she used when trying to diffuse potential conflicts. I opened the envelope and began spreading photographs across the table, each image showing Madison living luxuriously during the exact periods when she claimed to be in financial crisis. The contrast was so stark that no explanation could possibly justify the discrepancy between her stories and her reality. These photos were taken during the past 3 months, while Madison was supposedly being threatened by dangerous creditors. I explained, my voice steady, despite the adrenaline coursing through my system. "This one shows her at a 5-star resort in the Bahamas, taken the same week she called Nana Rose, crying about needing money for emergency medical procedures." Dad's fork clattered against his plate as he leaned forward to examine the evidence. His confusion was genuine and heartbreaking, representing the innocence that Madison and Mom had been exploiting throughout their criminal partnership. Madison's mask finally slipped completely as she realized the magnitude of what was happening. "Sarah, I can explain everything," she began, but her voice lacked the confident desperation that had characterized her previous performances. "Things are much more complicated than they appear." "Really?" I replied, pulling out additional documentation. "Because these bank records show exactly where every dollar of family money has been spent. Uncle Robert's tuition payment bought designer handbags. Cousin Julia's car repair money paid for cosmetic procedures. Nana Rose's medical emergency fund financed luxury vacations. As I continued presenting evidence, Mom's face transformed from confusion to calculation to resignation in a matter of seconds. She understood immediately that their scheme had been completely exposed, and that denial would be pointless in the face of overwhelming documentation. "How did you find all of this?" Mom asked quietly, her question revealing the admission that everything I was alleging was true. Professional investigators are remarkably efficient when they have cooperation from law enforcement agencies, I replied, watching both women's faces pale as they realized the legal implications of their situation, especially when the crimes involve wire fraud, elder abuse, and organized financial exploitation across state lines. The silence that followed was deafening. Dad sat motionless, his mind clearly struggling to process the revelation that his wife and daughter were sophisticated criminals who had been systematically defrauding their own family members. The betrayal was so profound that he seemed unable to formulate words or even coherent thoughts. Madison made one final attempt at manipulation, turning to Dad with tears streaming down her face. "Daddy, please don't let her destroy our family over money," she pleaded. "Sarah has always been jealous of our relationship, and now she's using these lies to turn everyone against us." But Dad was examining the photographs and financial records for himself, and the evidence was irrefutable. No amount of emotional manipulation could explain away the documented timeline of theft and deception that lay spread across our family dining table. "Madison," he said slowly, his voice heavy with disappointment that seemed to age him years in a matter of moments. "These photographs are real. These bank records are real. How could you do this to people who love you?" Mom finally spoke, but instead of remorse or apology, her words revealed the calculating mindset that had enabled their criminal enterprise. "We never intended for anyone to get hurt," she said defensively. "We just needed to solve some temporary problems, and we knew the family would want to help if they understood the situation." "Temporary problems," I responded, my anger finally breaking through my carefully maintained composure. "You've been stealing from elderly family members for months. You manipulated people into sacrificing their own financial security based on completely fabricated emergencies. This wasn't temporary assistance. This was systematic exploitation." The confrontation continued for another hour as additional evidence emerged and the full scope of their crimes became clear. Phone recordings played Madison's admissions of intent to defraud. Text messages revealed Mom's coaching strategies. Financial documents showed a pattern of theft that extended back nearly 2 years. By the time the evening ended, our family as we had known it was completely destroyed. Dad announced that he was filing for divorce and would be cooperating fully with law enforcement. Madison and Mom would be facing federal charges within days. The fairy tale of unconditional family love had been revealed as nothing more than an elaborate cover story for organized crime. As I drove home that night, I felt no satisfaction in their downfall, only profound sadness for what we had all lost. But I also felt something I had never experienced before: the clear knowledge that I had fought for justice and won. The aftermath of that devastating dinner unfolded with the methodical precision of a carefully orchestrated legal proceeding. Within 72 hours, federal agents had executed search warrants on both Madison's apartment and Mom's home office, seizing computers, financial records, and communication devices that would provide additional evidence for the prosecution's case. Sarah Martinez had been right about the federal implications of their crimes. The FBI's Financial Crimes Unit discovered that Madison and Mom were indeed part of a larger network of family fraud operations spanning multiple states. The mysterious K from Madison's text messages turned out to be Catherine Valdez, a former psychology graduate student who had developed sophisticated manipulation techniques specifically for targeting family relationships and exploiting emotional bonds for financial gain. The scope of the network was staggering. Over the past 3 years, Catherine had coached dozens of individuals in methods for systematically defrauding their own relatives, with the stolen money being funneled through complex financial instruments designed to obscure the money trail. Madison and Mom had been among her most successful proteges, generating over $200,000 in fraudulent family loans that had never been repaid. The discovery of this organized criminal enterprise transformed our family situation from an isolated incident into a crucial piece of a federal investigation that would ultimately protect hundreds of potential victims across the country. Every piece of evidence I had gathered was now being used to dismantle an entire infrastructure of exploitation that had been operating undetected for years. Meanwhile, the personal consequences for our family were devastating and immediate. Dad followed through on his promise to divorce Mom, but the emotional toll was visible in every interaction. The man who had spent 35 years believing he was married to a loving partner and raising an honest daughter was now grappling with the reality that he had been living with strangers who viewed him as nothing more than a useful cover for their criminal activities. The impact on our extended family was equally profound. When I delivered the evidence packets to each victimized relative, their responses ranged from heartbroken disbelief to explosive anger to complete emotional shutdown. Nana Rose, who had sacrificed her own medical care to help Madison, experienced what her doctor described as a minor cardiac episode triggered by the stress of learning about the betrayal. Uncle Robert's reaction was perhaps the most heartbreaking. A man who had worked 2 jobs for decades to provide educational opportunities for the next generation, he was devastated to learn that his contribution to Madison's supposed tuition had actually funded luxury purchases and cosmetic procedures. The betrayal attacked the very core of his identity as a family patriarch who protected and supported his relatives. "How could I have been so stupid?" he asked during one of our phone conversations, his voice cracking with emotion. "I pride myself on being able to spot scammers and con artists, but I never suspected my own niece would steal from me." I spent hours talking with each family member, helping them process the emotional trauma, while also ensuring they understood their legal options for recovering stolen funds. Sarah had connected us with a civil litigation attorney who specialized in fraud recovery, and early indications suggested that both criminal restitution orders and civil judgments would likely result in significant financial recovery for the victims. The criminal proceedings moved forward with remarkable speed once the federal prosecutors understood the scope of evidence available. Madison and Mom were both arrested on the same morning, taken into custody at their respective homes in a coordinated operation designed to prevent any attempts at evidence destruction or witness intimidation. Madison's initial response to arrest was to maintain her facade of victimhood, claiming that she had been manipulated by Mom and Catherine into participating in activities she did not fully understand. However, the extensive documentation of her social media presence and recorded conversations made this defense completely untenable. Her own words and actions provided irrefutable proof of intentional criminal activity. Mom's approach was more pragmatic. Through her attorney, she immediately began negotiating for a plea agreement that would result in reduced charges in exchange for full cooperation with the investigation of Catherine's network. Her intimate knowledge of the organization's methods and victim targeting strategies made her testimony valuable to prosecutors seeking to shut down the entire operation. The plea negotiations revealed additional details about their criminal partnership that were somehow even more disturbing than the original fraud. Mom had actually recruited Madison into Catherine's network, viewing her daughter's natural charisma and family connections as valuable assets for generating illegal income. What I had interpreted as Madison's independent criminal activity was actually the result of systematic training and coaching provided by her own mother. This revelation fundamentally changed my understanding of our family dynamics. Madison was certainly responsible for her choices and actions, but she had also been groomed from a young age to view family relationships as transactional opportunities rather than genuine emotional connections. Mom had essentially raised a daughter to become her criminal partner, destroying Madison's moral development in service of their fraudulent enterprise. The psychological evaluation, ordered by the court, confirmed this interpretation. Madison displayed classic symptoms of someone who had been systematically trained to manipulate others with little understanding of normal emotional boundaries or authentic relationship dynamics. Her entire personality had been shaped around the requirements of successful deception, leaving her genuinely unable to distinguish between performance and reality in many social situations. As the legal proceedings continued, I found myself grappling with complex emotions that shifted daily between anger, sadness, and something approaching pity. The people who had raised me and shared my childhood were facing decades in federal prison, but they had also revealed themselves to be fundamentally different from the individuals I thought I had known and loved. Dad struggled with similar emotional complexity attending every court hearing, despite the obvious pain of watching his wife and daughter face justice for their crimes. He had retained his own attorney to ensure that his retirement savings and assets would be protected from civil judgments, but he also established a victim compensation fund to help family members recover their losses more quickly than the legal system might otherwise allow. The transformation of our family structure was complete and irreversible. The people who had once gathered around our dining table for holidays and celebrations were now scattered across the country, some refusing to speak with anyone connected to the scandal, others struggling to rebuild their financial security after being victimized by people they had trusted completely. But something unexpected was also emerging from the wreckage of our family relationships. The relatives who had been victimized were beginning to connect with each other in ways that had never existed before, united by their shared experience of betrayal and recovery. A new kind of family bond was forming based on genuine mutual support, rather than the false loyalty that had enabled Madison and Mom's crimes. The reckoning was far from over, but justice was finally being served. 18 months after that life-changing dinner confrontation, I stood in a federal courthouse watching as Madison and Mom received their final sentences. The journey from discovery to justice had been long and emotionally exhausting, but seeing them held accountable for their crimes provided a sense of closure that I had not anticipated. Madison received 8 years in federal prison, followed by 3 years of supervised probation with mandatory restitution payments to all victims. The judge's statement during sentencing emphasized the calculated nature of her crimes and the particular cruelty of exploiting elderly family members who had trusted her completely. Her social media empire had been completely dismantled, her false identity exposed to all her followers, and her reputation destroyed beyond any possibility of rehabilitation. Mom received a 12-year sentence due to her leadership role in the criminal enterprise and her responsibility for recruiting and training Madison as her partner. The judge was particularly harsh in condemning her betrayal of maternal duties, noting that she had essentially raised her daughter to become a criminal rather than protecting her moral development. Her cooperation with the federal investigation of Catherine's network had resulted in a modest reduction in her sentence, but the evidence of her crimes was so overwhelming that meaningful leniency was impossible. Catherine herself had received a 15-year sentence after her network was completely exposed and dismantled. The federal investigation had identified over 300 victims across 18 states, with total losses exceeding $4 million. The psychological manipulation techniques she had developed were so sophisticated that law enforcement agencies were now using her case as a training example for recognizing organized family fraud schemes. The civil restitution process had been remarkably successful, with most family members recovering approximately 80% of their stolen funds through a combination of criminal restitution orders, civil judgments, and Dad's voluntary victim compensation fund. Nana Rose had received full restitution, plus medical expenses related to her cardiac episode. Uncle Robert had recovered his education fund with interest, and Cousin Julia had been compensated for both her financial losses and the emotional distress caused by the betrayal. More importantly, The legal proceedings had provided all of us with a clear understanding of how we had been manipulated and why our normal instincts for detecting deception had been ineffective against such sophisticated psychological techniques. Family bonds create unique vulnerabilities that skilled manipulators can exploit with devastating effectiveness, and recognizing these vulnerabilities was crucial for protecting ourselves against future victimization. The experience had fundamentally changed my relationship with the concept of family loyalty. I had learned that genuine love and support must be based on honesty and reciprocity, rather than blind obligation or emotional manipulation. Family relationships that require you to sacrifice your own well-being or financial security without question are not healthy relationships, regardless of blood connections or shared history. This lesson had broader implications that extended far beyond our specific situation. During the investigation and trial, I had connected with support groups for family fraud victims and discovered that exploitation of family bonds was far more common than most people realized. Adult children stealing from elderly parents, siblings manipulating each other for financial gain, and extended family members creating elaborate deception schemes were recurring patterns that destroyed thousands of families every year. My experience had also taught me the importance of trusting my instincts, even when they conflicted with family pressure or emotional manipulation. The initial skepticism I felt about Madison's story had been completely accurate, but I had nearly suppressed it in favor of maintaining family harmony. Learning to listen to my own judgment rather than prioritizing others' emotional demands had become a crucial life skill that extended into my professional relationships and personal decision-making. The workplace lessons had been particularly valuable. The same manipulation techniques that Madison and Mom had used were common in toxic professional environments, where colleagues or supervisors might exploit loyalty guilt or fear to achieve their personal goals at others' expense. Recognizing these patterns early had helped me navigate several challenging situations at work and establish healthier boundaries with demanding clients or manipulative coworkers. Dad had emerged from the ordeal as a completely different person, but one who was ultimately stronger and more authentic than the man who had unknowingly enabled criminal activity for years. His divorce had been finalized with minimal complications, as Mom's criminal conviction had eliminated any possibility of her claiming significant assets or alimony. He had moved into a smaller home closer to other family members who had also been victimized, creating a new support network based on genuine mutual care, rather than the false loyalty that had characterized our previous family structure. The holidays had become particularly meaningful, as we learned to celebrate with people who genuinely cared about our well-being rather than viewing us as potential sources of financial exploitation. The dinners were smaller and quieter, but they were filled with authentic conversation and real emotional connection, rather than the performative family harmony that had disguised years of criminal activity. Nana Rose, despite her initial health scare, had become one of the strongest advocates for family fraud awareness in our community. She had begun speaking at senior centers and community organizations about the warning signs of financial exploitation, using her own experience to help protect other elderly individuals from similar victimization. Her courage in sharing her story publicly had prevented numerous other families from experiencing the devastation that had affected our own. Most surprisingly, the experience had opened doors to meaningful relationships that would never have developed under our previous family structure. The shared trauma of betrayal had created bonds between previously distant relatives, and the process of recovery had revealed character strengths and personal qualities that had been hidden beneath years of surface-level family interactions. As I reflected on the complete transformation of my life over the past 18 months, I realized that the destruction of our false family harmony had actually created space for something much more valuable: authentic relationships based on genuine care, respect, and mutual support. The people who remained in my life after the scandal were individuals who had proven their integrity under pressure and demonstrated their commitment to honesty even when truth was painful. The greatest lesson from this entire ordeal was that family should be defined by love and loyalty that flows in both directions, not by blood relationships that enable one-sided exploitation. Justice had been served not just through criminal convictions and financial restitution, but through the creation of healthier relationship patterns that would protect all of us from future manipulation. Sometimes the most devastating betrayals lead to the most profound personal growth and the discovery of strength you never knew you possessed. So tell me, have you ever had to choose between family loyalty and doing what's right? Have you experienced that gut feeling that something wasn't quite right with someone you trusted? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below because family karma can be complicated, but justice always finds a way. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button, subscribe for more real-life justice stories, and share this with someone who might need to hear that it's okay to question family demands that don't feel right. Thank you for joining me on this emotional journey, and remember that sometimes the family you choose is stronger than the family you're born into. Until next time, trust your instincts and never let anyone make you feel guilty for protecting yourself.